starting with consonants of the week. P, which is usually written P, right? At the start of words, such as in the word pants, P is aspirated. I'm just gonna write down a few words that will highlight this consonant for you. So, P is a stop. What does it mean for a consonant to be a stop? Well, basically, that means that you are pushing two things together. That could be your lips, bilabial stop. So this is pushing both of your lips together and pushing air out of them, and then releasing the lips and pushing air through at the same time. So that air comes out of them and makes a sound, like. That is a stop. Stops in English are P, T, K, G, B, and D. Right? Those are the stops in English. In conventional phonics, they describe stops as voiced and voiceless, but that is not quite true. In linguistics, we describe English stops as what is known as having a Fortis-Lenis distinction. Fortis, meaning strong, obviously. Fort, like very strong. Fortify, in French too, fort, strong, right? Lenis, meaning smooth. What this means is that P is a Fortis consonant. It is relatively less voiced and more aspirated than another consonant in the same place, like B, right? If you say B, you will notice that it's not actually very voiced at all. I'm not saying B, 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 B. That's a common mistake ESL speakers make. You should not fully voice your B's and your voice stops, because they are not voiced stops. They are Lenis. Let me write this down. So Fortis and Lenis stops. P is Fortis, T is Fortis, K is Fortis, B is Lenis, D is Lenis, G is Lenis. Actually, K and G, K and G are voiced and voiceless. So that just leaves P and B, P, B, T, and D as Fortis and Lenis. Dog. Like a consonant such as dog is not that far off from a consonant such as words such as like tog or something. But I'll get to that when we get to the T and D episode. For now, all you have to know is that P is the Fortis consonant and D is the Lenis consonant. Which is not the same as voiced and voiceless. I mentioned something called aspiration earlier, right? Aspiration in normal English is like your dreams. It's like your hopes, right? It's like your heimong, your wish. It's a long-term goal that you one day hope, you one day aspire to reach. Aspiration comes from the Latin word aspire, which is breathe, right? Breathe. I think it's specifically inhale, but I'm not sure. Anyways, what this means is that aspiration means that you have to let out a puff of air, as you can see in the word puff or pants. Pants. if you put your hand to your mouth, this is a classical exercise, textbook exercise to test for aspiration. If you put your hand to your mouth, when you say pants, you should feel air come out of your, you should feel a puff of air hitting your palm, right? That is aspiration. 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 In words such as pants, yeah. Now, what criteria does P need to meet for it to be aspirated? Well, it needs to be at the start of a word or at the start of a stressed syllable. For example, in words such as span. Not in words such as span, sorry. But it needs to be at the start of a word. It needs to be the start of a word. Next, we have words such as span. In consonant clusters, such as SP, at the end of the consonant cluster, P is unaspirated and is also pronounced morphology. Whereas at the start of a word, P is the most fortis you can get. Span. If you say the word span, you should notice that the P sounds a bit more like, it sounds very much like a B. Span. And if you're not, you should pronounce it much more like a B. Span. At the end of words, such as snap, your stops should be unreleased. What does unreleased mean? Well, remember how when I said stops have a release? That is, you make air come out of your lips by releasing the gap between two. Let's say these are your lips, right? Normally they are like, I assume they are like this, right? With your teeth or whatever, right? Then when you make a stop, when you make a P, you are pressing your lips together like this, and in reality there's little to no gap, right? And then you are releasing the stop, then air comes out and makes a sound. What an unreleased stop means is that this doesn't happen. So at the end of a word, you keep the stop held, such as in the word stop. Stop. I am not releasing the stop because it is at the end of a word. As with all stops, there is some. As with all stops in English, there is something called a masked release, and this applies to both Fortis-Lenis stops. There's something called a masked release. Because the E vowel is reduced in a word such as trap. Holy shit, it shakes so much. Oh my god. You need to lock the wheels or something? Oh, the wheels are locked. No, they're not. I should lock the wheels. Is that better? No. Got it. Anyways. Because the E is reduced, functionally it sounds like tap. Right? what a masked release means is that if this is stop number 1 and this is stop number 2, you would expect that this closing of the stop, of the second stop at the second area, in this case D, which is not created by your two lips, but instead by your tongue and your soft palate or your alveolar ridge. I forgot. I think it's your alveolar ridge, but it is created, which is created by you would expect that the closing of that would happen after the release of air from your mouth. However, in a masked release stop, the closing of the stop actually happens before the release. Now, because this is at the end of a word, this is also never released. So what this means so this happens after this. After this. So essentially what this means is that the actual P sound comes after the D is first produced. Right? If you think about this as a conveyor belt of sorts, right? The P is produced, and then the P moves along, and then the D is produced. But before the P reaches the end, the D is behind. So these consonants are not produced one by one. They overlap with each other. And that is what's known as a masked release. This usually happens with endings such as ed, right? Such as, I think ed is the only one. Really? Maybe tion, but that's not pronounced as a stop. The frickin'. So, yeah, I think it's most common with endings such as ed, tapped, slapped, mapped, right? They all follow this masked release pattern. This is extremely important if you want to sound like a native. Cupful. What's up with this word? This is what's up with this word. If there's a cluster PF, natives do not say PF. Natives instead say it as a fricative, as an African, sorry. So instead of saying cupful, we say cupful. We say the instead of, because that takes a lot of time. So once this is different from masked release, because these two are not offset, right? Because with masked release, what happens is obviously because there's a stop and you have only one mouth, you must release all stops at once. You must release all stops at once, right? So that's the difference between masked release and this African, because this F is not a stop. What does this mean? It means it can be made at the same time as this P, and that is what happens with couple. Couple. This is also extremely important if you want to sound like a native. There are another 7 consonant clusters which are pronounced like affricates instead of separate consonants. But we will cover that in future consonants of the week.